Right.
Check at the
So
bottom of your screen.
yeah, I
Okay.
saw it, right? So Legionnaire's disease, and I guess these things in preparing these lessons, most of these things are no longer just on paper anymore. But because I guess of the virus, it's so much real then, that when you read this, it's so much, you see what's taking place in the world anyway, right? So we have Legionnaire's disease is a severe form of pneumonia, right? And I guess most of us know this. Someone go through. I know people like Videsh know these things by heart anyway, right? So just to run through the main thing, it's really caused by a bacterium, and again, anything that is caused by a bacteria, fungi, they do have cure for them. I mean, viruses don't have a cure, so there's normally a cure for Legionella. Found in water between 20 to 50 degrees, such as water cooling towers, recirculating water cooling systems, air conditioning sprays, etc. Shall get to the other one there. Symptoms includes, and I guess the symptom is like all, viruses anyway. You have aching muscles, headaches, fever, followed by a cough, confusion, emotional disturbance, shortness of breath, lung failure. So much of this is like what you see with the COVID thing anyway, and so they are so closely related. Prevention, we have proper design of water systems, chlorination of water to concentrations 2 to 4 parts per million, heating water to 55 to 60 degrees Celsius, right? Leptospirosis, another one that we should be familiar with. Did anyone check out the January 2020 exam paper?
No, I didn't check it yet.
No, I didn't.
Right, okay. remember NEBOSH, they put out, I have it here. I don't know if we'll probably take a look at it, but leptospirosis was on it.
Okay.
Right? So what that means is that I don't think leptospirosis will come again, I guess, in September, right? So again, just to run through, please feel free just to come in and give, I guess, a statement. You'll kind of give a bit of variety to the recording, right? So leptospirosis caused by the zoonotic bacteria Leptospirum. Two forms exist. The one that normally is found in the urine of the rats, and then you have one from cattle, right? Cattle to humans, typically again in the urine or the animal droppings, right? Symptoms can include, again, flu-like illness with persistent and severe headaches, vomiting, muscle pain, jaundice, meningitis, kidney failure, and of course, death, right? So the list goes on. Remember, this one, though, is not really caused by the rats, but the bacterium that is in the urine of the rats. Rennie, hi.
Hi.
Hi, right? So workers at risk, I guess, like I said, you could all run through this, water and sewage work, wherever you have, I guess, that combination of, where workers can be exposed to animal droppings, right? Maintenance workers, farming workers, that one day was actually interesting to me because I have been, I guess, in the backyard a lot, and I did purchase some fertilizer, well, animal droppings anyway. So I had to take precautions while I was taking a read of this anyway here. Right, controls, eradication of rodents, proper PPE, proper hygiene, precautions, washing with soap and water, avoid contact with contaminated water, reporting leptospirosis to the HSE. Right, noroviruses, a group of viruses, I just explained this one, that is transmitted via the fecal oral route, for example, using the toilet and not washing your hands. This is where we get gastro from, right? Quite common in children, in fact, right? So causes gastroenteritis with symptoms being the same as all, I guess, flus anyway. You have sickness, diarrhea, stomach pains, basically controlled by proper hygiene, washing of hands, sanitation of work areas, and found typically in schools, etc. Right, any questions on those there?
No.
No, right. Okay, well, I think I had said before on the last video that I found this chapter, a lot of people love this chapter because it's such an easy one, right? Chapter 6 coming up is a much more calculation type chapter. You have to calculate, noise, exposure levels and stuff like this. But a lot of people do like this because it's pretty much straightforward. Right, what I'll do here though, this one, I have my book, this is on page 126. this is how you will do a biological risk assessment, right? So typically you can look at it like that, right? How to do a biological risk assessment. And you can look at it like that, meaning that you can look and see if you can get 10 things about these biological agents to put on a risk assessment, right? So the first couple of slides there, this one, the one that follows, and the one that follows that one, really talks about that they do have an approved listing of biological agents. It is more or less a guidance published by the HSE, and it's known as, it's on one of these slides, is known as the ACDP listing, and that stands for the committee that put that list together, right? The Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens. And that goes, for example, like a guidance slash ACOPS coming out of the COSH regulation, and because it has that ACOP native to it, it is more or less legally binding, right? I would advise now, I did have an extract of it. I would advise you try to go and get it. I guess if I get the time, I'll try to share it with you as well here. So what that list is a list that have, for example, all of the viruses, bacteria, fungi by name, right? And they will have on them, for example, like what category they fall into, right? And if you had a read of the slides before, you would see that you have 4 categories, right? You have like category 1 being, you know, it's probably not going to cause harm to humans. Category 4 would be like the H1N1 and like the coronavirus, and that it doesn't have a treatment or a cure. So what they are saying here, I guess in short, is that if you are doing a biological risk assessment, what you have to consider is the ACDP grouping. You have to consider that. What classification did it fall under in the advisory committee for dangerous pathogens? Let me just see if I can make it a bit more interesting there and see if I can find the book, right? Because the recording will be finished in a bit, right? Let me get the controls to drop down a bit, which it not doing, right? Right, so new share. And okay, I don't seem to have it. I don't seem to have it lined up in. Let me see if we can see this one here. Can you all see that home screen there?
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes I know it shares, but then all you see is just the home screen, right?
ACDP.
Yeah, ACDP, you can put that into Google, and that's what you have to consider then. I don't know if you see in the book will come up in a couple of minutes, right? So somebody can download. You can let me know what your view is, because on my side, I'm not getting the option to put new share just now. Right, but that is what you see. Like, for example, you'd see, are you all seeing this view? The approved list of biological agents?
No, I just
Okay.
see in the screen before.
Right, and that's what I figured. Yeah, just now. Let me just get this to come back up. Right, okay, let me see if I can get it now. Yeah, says
just send the approved the HSC guidance document on the chat.
Right, see if you see it now.
Yeah,
Approve
right.
Right,
Good,
put it in the
good,
chat.
good. Yeah, right. Okay, so if you just take a look at this, just just an image view, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see it has on it. I'm going down a bit. You see it has on it the list of biological agents, right here, and then what you'd see its classification, right? I'll move this a bit. You'd see, so you could pull out, I guess, a disease from off this, right? So again, that's what it's saying, right? So Mycobacterium, right? This one here, number 3, vaccine is available. So what they're saying there, in short, and that if you're doing a biological risk assessment, yeah, right, okay, good. So it's not coming through there. All right, let me get it again, right? So, Right, so I'm actually seeing the four of you all there now. All right, so yeah, back to the PowerPoint. So yeah, so that's it there, right? So you all are seeing the PowerPoint again?
Nah,
No.
You're not seeing
no.
it? Oh, okay, but I did. Okay,
Right, PowerPoint.
right, okay, good. Okay, apparently it takes a couple of seconds, right? Okay, so yeah, so that's what this was about. Yeah, this funny looking slide here that talks about the purpose. So what is the purpose of the approved list of biological agents? The purpose is to use it in a risk assessment, right? So if something has a vaccine, but then okay, it's not going to be that bad. But if it doesn't have a vaccine, then it's going to be, you know, the risk associated with it is going to be quite worse anyway, right? So you think again, and so what they were saying there is that most of the diseases on the approved list of biological agents must be reported to the health and safety executive, and of course we should know the law here, RIDO, talks about, you know, diseases as well, and they have some here: anthrax, hepatitis, HIV, influenza, leptospirosis, Legionella, and the list goes on, right? Quite interesting doing in putting the lesson together and getting that ACDP listing for you all. I actually downloaded it straight from the HSC website like yesterday, hoping that they would have updated it and put in H1N1 and Corona and stuff, but those have not been added to the book as yet. The ACDP listing, those have not been added as yet. And that's kind of weird because it's about 4 months with the virus around anyway, but they have not added those to the book thus far. All right. So I guess what I could do here, I wanted to say that what you have to consider here was the same thing, the biological risk assessment, and maybe to come up with 10 things to consider in doing a biological risk assessment, right? So we have one already. In fact, we probably have one from the last class, right? The last session, which is you have to know what you're dealing with, right? The slides I'm going through here, these slides basically talk about a risk assessment must be done if you remember the management of health and safety at work regulation. This regulation basically say a risk assessment must be done. It must be suitable and sufficient. It must be done for nursing mothers and young persons, etc. So there's really nothing too new here other than saying that a risk assessment must be done. And because we are now looking at biological agents, so likewise, a risk assessment must be done for biological agents, right? So this is a bit of law. The last point here, as you should know, the old HSW Act never really used the word risk assessment, but it is implied with respect to, you know, risk to people and the environment. But the HSW Act 1974 never really mentioned the phrase risk assessment anyway, right? So that's just something to read and to move on to, right? So if we can get back to the point, which is what is the items to consider in doing a biological risk assessment? This was the same ACDP group I was talking about. So this is an extract more or less from the book. Group 1, ability to cause human disease is unlikely. Group 4, I just been 1 and 4. Ability to cause human disease is severe, and there is spread to the community, and there is no prophylaxis, which is like a cure or a treatment available. So again, if you know that, and because of the world that we live in today, this is what we know for, you know, a group of diseases anyway, right? SARS and H1N1 and the COVID-19, etc. So that those tend to be high risk as opposed to something, you know, being caused by a bacteria, and it has, you know, more or less, you know, antibodies available for those, or some sort of, you know, treatment available for those anyway, right? So this is what I may want to kind of zone down on, and this is throughout the slides. What would be like 10 things to consider in doing a biological risk assessment. So we have the identity of the agent, if it is a bacteria, a virus, a protozoa, a fungi, the nature of disease, how serious it is, and the availability of vaccination or treatment, the quantity of agent in use, the possibility of escape into the environment causing human disease, what is the general health of employees, you know, like would it attack susceptible people like what the what the coronavirus is doing, the number of persons likely to be exposed, the competence and training of workers, do they have facilities for testing, monitoring, health surveillance of those employees? So I say employees, but I guess also members of the public as well, right? So this will be what you'll put then on the heading of a risk assessment if it was a biological risk assessment. Any comments on these here?
No.
Right. Anybody else? Larry, anything to share?
Oh, I'm Shadrach, not at this time.
Right. Okay. All right. So I didn't want to cover too many concepts in one session, so I thought that was a good one, right? The items to consider in a risk assessment. And as you would know, once you do, I guess I'll try to end this around here anyway, but a couple more slides and I end with that thought though, right? So once you do a risk assessment, then I guess you end up with something being category 3, category 4. You have to put controls in place, right? And if you look here, what you're going to see is the general idea of that, the general idea of using the hierarchy of controls. And, you're going to go through the idea of, if I can go through the slides a bit, you go through the idea of looking at the principles of prevention. If you go down a bit on the slides, you'll see them, right? So all of these things are all about control. So you consider the type and frequency of exposure to biological agents and how would you control them. And the idea here, if you go down a bit into it, is that you'd see, right? Actually, they talk about here basically the two types of like how infection could spread, intentional work as opposed to opportunistic. And then at the end of that, you have the general ideas of control, right? So trying to get back to that, you'd see, right, you see the principles of good practice. You'll see design and operate the process and activities to minimize emission. So the same idea of the, for those who know the principles of prevention.
Principles of good practice.
Yeah, the principles of good prevention, right? So what I wanted to zone down here on is, well, I guess you have to take that approach with that question. Remember, these things are not be like 10 maps, 10 maps. So maybe 10 things to consider in a risk assessment, but then 10 things to, to do to control then the risk once you have, a biological agent in more or less one of the categories anyway, right? And more so like category 3 and category 4. So I guess in the next class, what we could do is zone down on the controls. What I'll leave you with, I want to leave you with the thought that the idea in the controls though is that we more look at engineering controls. And the engineering controls here are not really, the good old-fashioned LEV system, but it's various means of isolation. So you'll start seeing that word. And of course, you'd have heard that word so many times, I guess, in the news, right? I know the need for isolation. So when they start talking about control, yes, we would prefer eradication and elimination and substitution, which these things are not possible. For example, like with the coronavirus, right? So you find a lot of the controls is more on isolation and different types of isolation measures. So I'll end here. I want to take a look at, if we can look at the 2020 past paper a bit, but I'll end here, at least a formal piece of it here, by saying that when they ask for the controls, you have to be very down to earth with the controls. Like if you look at this slide, like what is really considered primary barriers? And when I mean down to earth, I think because of the coronavirus, we all know these things, like really down to earth controls would be, like washing your hands with soap, some sort of alcohol-based product, for 20 seconds or so, making sure that surfaces are clean, they are impervious to spills. So we'll focus on that next time. And the end of it though is that you do go into very good, what they call isolation measures or isolation equipment, such as like different forms of biological cabinets anyway, right? That have on them, I know you looked at the lesson, probably looked at the PowerPoints, you'll see on them, like cabinets that do have, like high efficiency particulate air filters. They have in it a certain negative pressure. We'll talk about that next class as well, right? So, and getting those controls, when they talk about the controls, try to get it to be very down to earth, precise, like using some sort of disinfectant, etc., right? Some sort of chlorine-based product. So that's how they get the controls out of this for the past papers. And it's quite down to earth, even though you see it as primary, secondary, and tertiary barriers anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Let me, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, nothing. Just said
Right.
okay.
Right. Right. So let me just get, I think again, I have the 2020 people.
Question
Scored.
8 is the topic, the same topic.
Say again?
Question 8 on the January 20 paper.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, again, I guess the good idea is knowing that, that those things would have come, it wouldn't come again, though, right? At least as a trend anyway, right? I think I did see cryptosporidiosis, and again, that's quite a repeat question anyway, right? Of course, how could I forget? You know, I forgot. I mean, 6 weeks and probably more has gone by. But you know, I mean, I would want to say an official congratulations. If I have it correct, I think everybody here would have passed the exam, the January exam. Yes.
Well, except me, I didn't do anything.
Okay, right. So Melanie, okay. So Diane is there. I know. So I know it's. I mean, it's. I really did send out a congratulations, but again, seeing you all face to face, it has been that long anyway, right? You know. So Diane, Videsh, I think you did exceptionally well, right? I mean, I've actually known that you was capable of it anyway, right? So it's good. It's good to see it. You know that you got a high mark anyway, right? So I know it was Videsh, and I think Stacy is on here as well. I'm not quite sure if Stacy is on as well, right? But I know Diane, Videsh, right? So quite a lot of folks did well on that January paper, right? Are you all seeing this particular view?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, right. So this is the 2020 paper. So I think it's number 8, Videsh just said there. So let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Right? And again, the good idea there is that if it would have been there, it would not repeat anyway. All right, it's still probably loading on my end as well. That's number 10. Okay, is it like, does it need to be a bit enlarged, not on your side, or can you all make it?
No, it's okay.
Okay, all right.
It's okay.
All right, okay. All right. So it says there, and of course you wouldn't do it now. I mean, it's just to kind of add a nice past paper into this session. I would have probably wanted a better one. I really didn't go and plan this. I just happened to have 2020 on the view there, right? So I guess by looking at it, a large livestock farm employs a number of people who are involved in caring for animals, cleaning out animal enclosures, and disposing of waste materials. During such work, employees may be exposed to zoonoses. So that was the other lesson, right? So a zoonose is really a disease that could be spread from animals to humans anyway. Give the meaning of the term zoonose, outline how and when the farm employees are likely to be exposed to cryptosporidiosis and leptospirosis. And those will just come from here anyway, right? I mean, the answers for that is going to come from this anyway, as to what they were doing, right? Caring for the animals, cleaning out enclosures, disposing of waste materials, etc. Outline a range of practical controls that should be used to minimize the risk associated with exposure to zoonoses. And again, you can break this on top here, caring for the animals, the same thing again. And then identify 2 other zoonoses that employees working on the farm could be exposed to. Right? I'm not right? I'm going to read all the comments.
I think that same question came in another past paper.
Yeah, this is the old past paper.
Yeah, and there's a thing, I mean, the fact that it's January 2020 and you also that you didn't see it, it means that it must have been like an older past paper anyway, right? So I did promise you all half an hour. I know it's yeah, just about 10:32 there. I don't want to take much of your time, right? But it's good seeing you all, hopefully everybody as well, right? You know, I don't know if Diane, how are the kids going, Diane?
Good, good.
Good. My son was actually, he had a bit of teething problems anyway, right? So he had a bit of the virus. Well, I guess the cough and the cold anyway, but it more or less subsided, right? I guess some of his teeth, you know, more or less decided to show up anyway. right? So I would leave this here. I don't know if you want to take a look at this paper. I'm not too sure if you all would want a longer class. Now we have been kind of, let me just stop the recording there. So I'll talk about some of these informal things away from the recording, right? Right. So for those of us who, so is this one of your first Zoom calls as well for most of us? Anybody else?
Oh,
Yeah, first time.
Right. Okay, good. Well, I have been on
First
some,
time, first time.